Over nearly a decade, Dominique Pelicot drugged his wife Gisèle and invited over 70 men to rape her in their own home, a secret so dark it shattered the facade of their quiet French village life. In the picturesque town of Mazan, nestled amidst the rolling Provençal hills, life seemed serene, untouched by the chaos of the outside world. It was a place where neighbors exchanged pleasantries in cobblestone streets, and the aroma of lavender filled the air. Yet, behind the closed doors of the Pelicot household, a reality far more sinister was unfolding, hidden from everyone, even from Gisèle Pelicot herself. Gisèle had spent half a century married to her husband, Dominique, believing she knew him better than anyone. She trusted him, shared her life with him, and thought of their union as an unbreakable bond of love and partnership. What she didn't know was that the man she called her husband had been systematically betraying her in ways so grotesque and unimaginable that they would shake an entire nation to its core. The revelation began not in the privacy of their home but in the most mundane of settings, a supermarket in Carpentras. There, on an otherwise ordinary afternoon, a sharp-eyed security guard, Thibault Ray, noticed Dominique Pelicot behaving suspiciously. Using a camera hidden inside his shopping bag, Dominique was caught filming up women's skirts, a petty crime that seemed deplorable but far from extraordinary. However, this small transgression would soon expose a much darker reality. When Dominique was arrested, police seized his electronic devices, as was standard procedure. What they found on his computers was far beyond anything they had anticipated, a digital labyrinth of depravity. Videos, photographs, and detailed logs revealed that Dominique had been drugging Gisèle and inviting dozens of men into their home to assault her while she lay unconscious. The evidence was meticulously catalogued, showing the calculated precision with which Dominique orchestrated his crimes. For Gisèle, the truth unraveled in a whirlwind of shock and disbelief. As she sat in a police station, her mind struggled to process the enormity of what was being revealed. The man she had trusted, loved, and built her life with had turned her into an unwitting participant in a series of grotesque violations. Each new detail was like a fresh wound, cutting deeper into the illusion of the life she thought she knew. This story is not just about crime, it is about betrayal, resilience, and the quest for justice. Gisèle's journey would take her from victimhood to advocacy, exposing not only the depths of human cruelty but also the enduring strength of the human spirit. Her story would spark conversations about consent, trust, and the hidden dangers lurking within the most ordinary lives. As the layers of this case were peeled back, the Pelicot's quiet life in Mazan became a symbol of duality, the public face of domestic harmony juxtaposed against a private reality of horror. Gisèle's ordeal would ultimately resonate far beyond Mazan's borders, challenging societal norms and exposing the darkness that can hide in plain sight. Gisèle Pelicot's life appeared to be the kind that many envied, idyllic, stable, and filled with love. Born in 1952 in Villingen, West Germany, to a French military family, Gisèle's early years were shaped by resilience in the face of tragedy. At just 9 years old, she lost her mother, leaving her father to raise her with discipline and unwavering affection. Despite this loss, her childhood was a mosaic of fond memories, stories of survival, and an enduring sense of strength. In 1973, Gisèle's life changed forever when she met Dominique Pelicot. He was a young man with a troubled past, his childhood clouded by the shadow of a domineering father. Yet, to Gisèle, he was the embodiment of charm, long-haired, driving a Citroën 2CV, and flashing a smile that promised a future filled with love and adventure. Their romance was a whirlwind, culminating in a marriage driven by passion and the promise of stability. Their early life together was seemingly blissful. Settling in the Paris suburbs, they built a home and a family, welcoming 3 children into their lives. Gisèle took pride in being the family's cornerstone, balancing her role as a mother with a successful career at the state electricity company, where she climbed the ranks to a managerial position. Dominique, meanwhile, dabbled in various jobs, electrician, estate agent, always chasing entrepreneurial dreams that often ended in financial disappointment. To outsiders, the Pelicots represented the epitome of a happy family. Their home was alive with laughter, the sound of children's footsteps echoing through the halls, and later, the joy of grandchildren. Friends saw Gisèle as the heart of the household, radiating warmth and love. Dominique, though occasionally distant, played the role of the supportive husband. For Gisèle, her marriage was a source of comfort and companionship. She spoke of Dominique with admiration, recalling how they navigated life's challenges together. Even when life tested their bond, briefly separating due to financial difficulties in the early 2000s, they remarried in 2007, reaffirming their commitment to each other. However, cracks in their seemingly perfect life began to form, though they were so subtle that Gisèle barely noticed them. She trusted Dominique implicitly, never imagining the darkness lurking within his heart. Even her fleeting affair in the 1990s, a moment of vulnerability she confessed to Dominique, had seemed to strengthen their bond after his forgiveness. Similarly, Dominique's own indiscretions appeared to be behind them. In 2013, the couple retired to Mazan, a picturesque village where they intended to enjoy their golden years. Surrounded by the tranquil beauty of their garden and pool, they settled into the rhythms of retirement. Gisèle joined a choir, and Dominique took up cycling, both embracing this slower phase of life. Their children and grandchildren visited often, filling the house with vitality and reinforcing the image of a couple who had weathered life's storms together. Yet, it was during this time that Gisèle's health began to decline in mysterious ways. She experienced memory lapses, weight loss, and hair falling out, symptoms that left her fearing early-onset Alzheimer's or even a brain tumor. She spoke of total blackouts, periods of time she couldn't account for, and a pervasive sense of unease. Dominique, ever the concerned husband, accompanied her to doctor's appointments, his behavior outwardly attentive and loving. No one, not the doctors, friends, or even Gisèle herself, suspected the truth. The Pelicots remained a beloved couple in Mazan, celebrated for their resilience and the life they had built. Gisèle was seen as a loving mother, grandmother, and devoted wife, while Dominique's seemingly steadfast support earned him admiration. The contrast between this public perception and the private horror Gisèle would soon uncover was staggering. For Gisèle, the life she thought she knew was a carefully constructed illusion. Her trust in Dominique, her health concerns, and even the moments of care and support he offered were part of a facade. The betrayal was not just personal but systemic, infiltrating every aspect of her life. Her story revealed the fragility of trust and the stark difference between the lives we present to the world and the truths we hide behind closed doors. It was a reminder that darkness can thrive in the most ordinary settings, unnoticed until it's too late. It was a routine day in 2020 when the chain of events began to unravel Dominique Pelicot's carefully constructed facade. In a supermarket in Carpentras, a sharp-eyed security guard noticed Dominique behaving oddly. With a camera discreetly concealed inside his shopping bag, Dominique was caught filming under women's skirts. This act of voyeurism, though revolting, appeared at first to be nothing more than a petty crime. However, when Dominique was detained, and police seized his electronic devices as part of their investigation, what they uncovered would horrify even the most seasoned investigators. The contents of Dominique's hard drives revealed a digital archive that was both meticulous and monstrous. Investigators found hundreds of videos documenting the repeated sexual assaults of Dominique's wife, Gisèle. The footage showed her lying unconscious while Dominique orchestrated and filmed the attacks. Compounding the horror, these weren't isolated incidents. They stretched back nearly a decade and involved dozens of men whom Dominique had invited into their home to participate. The videos were catalogued with calculated precision. Dominique kept detailed logs, complete with dates, times, and information about the men who assaulted Gisèle. Messages exchanged between Dominique and these men showed how he coordinated the crimes, arranging for them to enter his home when Gisèle was incapacitated by drugs he had secretly administered. In some messages, Dominique boasted about the assaults, describing Gisèle as the perfect victim because she remained completely unaware of what was happening. For the investigators, the evidence was overwhelming in its scale and depravity. What began as a minor voyeurism case had exploded into one of the most disturbing crimes they had ever encountered. Police described Dominique's actions as inhuman, and the digital evidence served as an unflinching testament to his calculated cruelty. When Gisèle was brought to the police station and informed of what had been discovered, the weight of the revelation was staggering. At first, she struggled to process the enormity of what she was being told. The man she had trusted for decades, the father of her children, had systematically drugged and violated her trust in ways she couldn't have imagined. As the police shared the evidence with her, Gisèle's world crumbled. She was shown videos of herself, unconscious and unaware, while strangers violated her in her own home. Each video, each log entry, was another piece of evidence that tore apart the illusion of her life. She later described the experience as waking up in a nightmare I didn't know I was living. In addition to the physical evidence, Gisèle began piecing together details of her life that had once seemed inexplicable. The memory lapses, unexplained bruises, and persistent illnesses that she had attributed to stress or age now made horrifying sense. Dominique had been poisoning her with sedatives, using her vulnerability to carry out his crimes. Each time she had woken up feeling groggy or disoriented, Dominique had assured her it was nothing, skillfully manipulating her into believing that she was simply unwell. The crimes shattered not only Gisèle's trust but also the perception of their marriage within their community. Friends and neighbors were left in shock as details of the case emerged. How could a man who had appeared so devoted to his wife be capable of such monstrosities? The revelations would forever alter the lives of everyone connected to the Pelicot family. As Gisèle grappled with the magnitude of Dominique's betrayal, she began to rebuild her narrative. Her shock turned to determination, and she resolved to seek justice, not only for herself but for the countless victims of similar crimes who remained unheard. For Gisèle, discovering the truth was both a devastating blow and the first step toward reclaiming her life. Dominique Pelicot's crimes were as methodical as they were depraved, each act meticulously planned and documented. Over nearly a decade, he used a calculated combination of trust, deceit, and technology to carry out a series of unspeakable violations against his wife, Gisèle, all while keeping her entirely in the dark. The heart of Dominique's system revolved around sedatives. For years, he secretly laced Gisèle's food and drinks with powerful drugs, rendering her unconscious for hours. These substances left her disoriented and vulnerable, ensuring that she wouldn't wake or remember what happened during the assaults. The effects of these drugs were severe. Gisèle often experienced memory lapses, unexplained bruises, and persistent fatigue, all of which she initially attributed to health issues related to aging or stress. Dominique, appearing concerned, accompanied her to doctors and reassured her that nothing was wrong, solidifying her trust while continuing his crimes. The digital evidence uncovered by investigators painted a broader picture of the scale and precision of Dominique's actions. Hundreds of videos were stored on his devices, each one cataloging a different instance of assault. These videos didn't just document his crimes, they revealed how Dominique orchestrated them. He used messaging apps to contact and recruit dozens of men, many of whom were strangers, inviting them to participate in the assaults while Gisèle lay unconscious. Some of the messages were transactional, others disturbingly casual, but all demonstrated Dominique's complete lack of empathy and his horrifying manipulation of his wife. What made Dominique's actions even more brutal was the level of detail in his documentation. Investigators discovered spreadsheets where he logged the dates and times of the assaults, the names or aliases of the men involved, and even specific details about the acts committed. This level of organization was a stark reminder that these crimes were not impulsive. They were premeditated, systematic, and carried out with cold precision. The videos themselves became a haunting form of evidence. Each file represented an attack, a moment where Gisèle's autonomy and dignity were stripped away without her knowledge. For investigators, watching these recordings was described as soul-crushing, revealing the extent of Dominique's betrayal in a way that words alone could not convey. One particularly disturbing aspect of the evidence was Dominique's demeanor in the footage. He could be seen directing the men, ensuring they followed his instructions while he filmed. At times, he even participated, further deepening the horror. His lack of remorse and the almost clinical way he went about the assaults revealed a mind devoid of empathy, driven by control and domination. Dominique's recruitment methods also exposed the underbelly of digital exploitation. Through encrypted messaging platforms, he reached out to men who shared his depraved interests. Some were willing participants, while others claimed ignorance, later arguing they had been led to believe Gisèle had consented. Dominique's manipulation extended beyond his wife to those he involved, creating a web of deceit that protected him for years. The true gravity of Dominique's crimes became evident not just in their scale but in their impact on Gisèle. For nearly a decade, she had been living a double life without even knowing it. While she believed herself to be a devoted wife and grandmother, Dominique was exploiting her vulnerability for his own gratification. Every health scare, every moment of confusion, was part of a larger scheme designed to keep her unaware and compliant. When investigators confronted Dominique with the evidence, his response was cold and deflective. He admitted to drugging Gisèle and organizing the assaults but offered no remorse, focusing instead on the technicalities of his actions. His lack of humanity became evident in his own words, where he described Gisèle as perfect because of her inability to resist or remember. For Gisèle, learning the full extent of the crimes was both devastating and empowering. The evidence not only revealed the depth of Dominique's betrayal, but also allowed her to reclaim her narrative. By confronting the horrors documented in the videos and logs, Gisèle found the strength to demand justice and ensure that Dominique's crimes would not be hidden any longer. The discovery of the videos set off a chain reaction. Dominique's crimes were no longer a private betrayal. They had become a public spectacle, one that horrified investigators, shocked the community, and demanded justice. French authorities quickly escalated the case, recognizing its unprecedented scale and the impact it would have on laws surrounding consent and digital crime. Dominique was formally charged with aggravated rape, drugging, and violation of privacy. The charges carried significant weight, not only because of the heinous nature of the crimes, but also because they highlighted gaps in existing laws around consent, incapacitation, and digital exploitation. His case would become a landmark, forcing legal systems and society to confront uncomfortable questions about trust, abuse, and the role of technology in modern crimes. As the case gained momentum, details about Dominique's methods and motivations began to emerge during questioning. His responses were devoid of remorse. He admitted to drugging Gisèle and arranging the rapes, but he showed no empathy for his wife or the trauma she had endured. Instead, he focused on the logistics of his crimes, treating them as calculated operations rather than acts of profound treachery. One of the most shocking revelations during Dominique's interrogation was how deeply he manipulated those involved. Through encrypted messaging platforms, he recruited dozens of men, some of whom claimed ignorance about Gisèle's incapacitation. Dominique's ability to coordinate and control these encounters without suspicion underscored his manipulative nature and the extent of his deceit. When Dominique's crimes were made public, the small town of Mazan, where the Pelots had retired, was plunged into shock. Neighbors and friends who had once admired Dominique as a supportive husband were left grappling with the enormity of his betrayal. Gisèle, who had been seen as the devoted matriarch of her family, became the focal point of sympathy and outrage. For many, the question lingered, how could such crimes happen in plain sight? As legal proceedings began, Dominique's defense attempted to shift the narrative. His lawyer, Pierre D., argued that Dominique's actions were the result of a psychological disorder rather than malice. The defense framed him as a man struggling with compulsions beyond his control, hoping to mitigate the severity of his sentence. But the evidence against him was overwhelming. Every video, every log entry, and every message painted a damning picture of premeditation, cruelty, and complete disregard for Gisèle's autonomy. For Gisèle, the legal proceedings were an agonizing ordeal. Each new revelation brought fresh pain, forcing her to relive the betrayal over and over. Yet, amidst the horror, Gisèle found a growing resolve. She was determined to see Dominique held accountable, not only for herself but for the countless victims whose stories had gone unheard. The case quickly attracted national and international media attention. Journalists flocked to Avignon, where Dominique was to be tried at the Court of Assizes. Headlines described the case as one of the most shocking examples of spousal betrayal in modern French history. Public discourse ignited around issues of consent, privacy, and the limitations of the law in addressing crimes of this nature. For the French legal system, the case posed unique challenges. How should the law address situations where consent is manipulated through incapacitation? Were existing penalties sufficient for crimes that combined physical violence with digital exploitation? These questions loomed over the proceedings, setting the stage for a trial that would become as much about societal reflection as it was about justice. For weeks, the courtroom was transformed into a stage where the darkest aspects of Dominique's crimes were laid bare, forcing everyone involved to confront the horrifying reality of what had transpired. The prosecution, led by Anne-Sophie V., began by framing Dominique's actions for what they were, a calculated, systematic betrayal of the person he was meant to cherish most. In her opening statement, Anne-Sophie described Dominique's crimes as not acts of passion, but deliberate and premeditated violations that shattered the boundaries of trust and consent. Her words set the tone for the trial, leaving no room for doubt about the gravity of the charges. The defense, under Pierre D., sought to humanize Dominique, painting him as a man grappling with deep-seated psychological issues rather than a remorseless predator. We must understand the man behind the crimes to fully comprehend this tragedy, Pierre argued, hinting at a strategy of mitigation rather than outright denial. His approach, however, struggled to gain traction against the mountain of evidence presented by the prosecution. The centerpiece of the trial was Gisèle's testimony. When she took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. Gisèle's presence was both fragile and formidable, a testament to her resilience in the face of unimaginable betrayal. She began by recounting her life with Dominique, the love they had shared, the trust she had placed in him, and the life they had built together. Her words were measured, her voice steady but charged with emotion. "I thought I knew him," Gisèle told the court. "I trusted him with my life, my health, my peace." She described waking up disoriented, the unexplained bruises, and the periods of memory loss that had once seemed like a medical mystery but now made horrifying sense. Her testimony was raw and unflinching, filled with moments where she paused to gather her strength before continuing. One of the most haunting aspects of her testimony was her recounting of how she discovered the truth. Each video, each message, was like reliving my life from someone else's perspective, she explained. The evidence was not just a catalogue of Dominique's crimes, but a cruel mirror reflecting the depths of his disloyalty. The courtroom sat in silence as Gisèle described the physical and psychological toll of the assaults. She spoke of the blackouts, the medical confusion, and the emotional devastation of realizing that her husband had orchestrated every moment. Her testimony wasn't just an accusation, it was an act of reclaiming her narrative, her dignity, and her voice. The prosecution bolstered Gisèle's testimony with expert witnesses who analyzed the digital evidence. Investigators detailed the videos, logs, and communications Dominique had used to plan and execute the assaults, emphasizing the deliberate nature of his actions. One expert described Dominique's digital archive as the work of a man who saw his wife not as a partner but as a possession to be used and controlled. Psychological experts also testified, shedding light on Dominique's personality. Dr. Jean-Pierre Bouchard, a forensic psychologist, described him as a classic psychopath, charming and manipulative, with no capacity for empathy or remorse. Dr. Bouchard's analysis helped the jury understand the mindset behind Dominique's crimes, framing them as a manifestation of control and domination rather than compulsive behavior. The defense, meanwhile, focused on discrediting Gisèle's testimony. During cross-examination, Pierre D. suggested that her memory lapses, caused by the drugs Dominique had administered, might lead to inaccuracies in her recollections. But Gisèle's response was unshakable. My memory might have been taken from me, but the evidence speaks clearly. Dominique's own testimony was cold and self-serving. He showed no genuine remorse, choosing instead to focus on his perceived victimhood. The media has destroyed me, he complained, ignoring the lives he had destroyed through his actions. His lack of empathy and refusal to take responsibility only further alienated him from the jury and the public. After weeks of emotional testimony, expert analysis, and grueling cross-examinations, the trial of Dominique Pelicot reached its climactic conclusion. The courtroom now sat in tense silence as the jury retired to deliberate. Outside the courthouse, a crowd of reporters, activists, and concerned citizens awaited the verdict, eager to hear whether justice would be served. Inside the jury room, the evidence weighed heavily. The videos, the logs, the communications, and the damning testimony from both Gisèle and expert witnesses painted an unassailable picture of guilt. The prosecution's case had been airtight, leaving little room for doubt. Dominique's own testimony, devoid of remorse and focused on self-pity, had only solidified his image as a manipulative predator. When the jury returned, the courtroom braced for the decision. The judge's voice, steady and solemn, broke the silence. Dominique Pelicot was found guilty on all counts: aggravated rape, drugging, and violation of privacy. The sentence was 20 years imprisonment, a punishment reflecting the premeditated and egregious nature of his crimes. The announcement of the verdict was met with an audible sigh of relief. Justice had been served, though it could never undo the pain Dominique had inflicted. For Gisèle, the verdict brought closure to one chapter of her life, but opened the door to a new and challenging journey of healing. The man who had controlled and manipulated her for nearly a decade would no longer have the power to harm her. Outside the courtroom, the reaction was swift and overwhelming. The trial had captivated not only the French public but also international audiences, and the outcome was seen as a victory for survivors of similar crimes. Legal experts praised the decision as a step toward recognizing the complexities of consent and the role of technology in modern crimes. However, it also underscored the gaps in existing laws, sparking calls for reform. For Gisèle, the trial had been a public dissection of her private life. Every detail of her betrayal had been laid bare for the world to see, an experience that had left her both exposed and empowered. In the days following the verdict, she spoke to the media, her voice steady but reflective. "Today, I am not just a survivor," she said. "I am someone who will fight for others who cannot speak for themselves. This verdict is not just about me. It's about justice for every person who has been betrayed, manipulated, or silenced." Her words resonated deeply, and Gisèle quickly became a symbol of strength and resilience. Advocacy groups rallied around her, using her story as a catalyst for discussions about consent laws, digital exploitation, and the rights of victims. For many, Gisèle's courage in confronting Dominique in court was as impactful as the verdict itself. Dominique, now stripped of his carefully constructed image, entered the prison system as a man condemned not only by the courts but also by public opinion. His lack of remorse and the overwhelming evidence of his crimes ensured that he would spend the rest of his life behind bars, his name synonymous with betrayal and cruelty. For Gisèle, the road ahead was far from easy. The scars left by Dominique's actions, both physical and emotional, would take years to heal. But the trial had given her something she had thought lost: her voice, her agency, and the ability to reclaim her life on her terms. The trial of Dominique Pelicot was more than a moment of personal justice for Gisèle. It was a pivotal event that forced France, and much of the world, to confront uncomfortable questions about consent, privacy, and the evolving nature of crime in the digital age. While Dominique's crimes were heinous in their own right, they exposed significant gaps in how the law defines and protects the most fundamental rights of individuals. One of the most pressing issues raised by the case was the legal understanding of consent. French law, like that of many countries, recognizes that consent cannot be given when a person is incapacitated. However, Dominique's actions revealed how easily drugs and deception could exploit this gray area. By incapacitating Gisèle, Dominique turned her inability to consent into a weapon, creating a situation where the law struggled to address the full scope of the crime. Legal experts debated whether existing laws adequately captured the severity of crimes where consent is manipulated through incapacitation. Dominique's case, with its digital evidence and systemic nature, highlighted the need for clearer legal definitions. For many, it became clear that laws needed to evolve to account for situations where perpetrators use drugs, technology, or other means to strip individuals of their autonomy. Another critical issue was the role of technology in modern crime. Dominique's use of digital devices to document, organize, and facilitate his crimes was unprecedented in its complexity. The case demonstrated how technology could be weaponized to violate privacy and perpetuate harm on an unimaginable scale. Videos, spreadsheets, and messages, all stored electronically, were central to both Dominique's crimes and his eventual conviction. This raised urgent questions about how law enforcement and legal systems could adapt to an era where crimes often leave a digital footprint. Could privacy laws keep pace with the ways in which technology could be used to exploit others? How could courts ensure that digital evidence was admissible and accessible without violating broader privacy rights? These were the questions Dominique's case forced onto the national stage. Beyond the legal system, the case sparked a larger cultural conversation about trust, power, and vulnerability in relationships. For many, the betrayal at the heart of Dominique's crimes was what made the story so haunting. The idea that someone could exploit their partner's trust so thoroughly struck a nerve, forcing people to re-examine assumptions about safety within intimate relationships. Advocacy groups rallied around Gisèle's story, using it as a platform to push for reforms in victim support systems. Survivors of similar crimes often face immense barriers in seeking justice, both legal and psychological. Gisèle's courage in confronting Dominique publicly became a symbol of resilience, inspiring others to come forward and demand change. Victim advocacy organizations called for better resources for survivors, including specialized counseling and stronger legal protections. The case also ignited discussions about societal attitudes toward spousal abuse and exploitation. For decades, marital rape had been a taboo subject in many countries, dismissed as something less severe than other forms of sexual violence. Dominique's crimes shattered this perception, demonstrating how abuse within a marriage could be just as calculated and destructive as any other crime. Public opinion, galvanized by the media coverage of the trial, leaned heavily in favor of harsher penalties for crimes involving spousal abuse and digital exploitation. Dominique's lack of remorse and the cold precision of his crimes left little room for sympathy, further fueling demands for legal reform. For Gisèle, the broader implications of her case were deeply personal. Though she hadn't intended to become a public figure, her story became a rallying cry for change. She met with lawmakers, activists, and survivors, lending her voice to campaigns for stronger laws and better resources for victims. In the years following the trial, Gisèle's advocacy work helped to bring attention to issues that had long been ignored, turning her pain into a force for progress. The trial was over, and justice had been served, but for Gisèle Pelicot, the end of the legal battle marked the beginning of another journey, one of healing, advocacy, and rebuilding her life after betrayal. The scars Dominique's crimes left on her, both physical and emotional, were profound. Yet, Gisèle's resolve to reclaim her life and transform her pain into a catalyst for change became her new purpose. In the immediate aftermath of the trial, Gisèle struggled to adjust to life without Dominique. For decades, he had been a constant presence in her world, a man she trusted with her health, safety, and happiness. Now, he was gone, not as the partner she once believed him to be, but as a convicted criminal serving life in prison for his heinous acts. The betrayal had shattered the foundation of her life, leaving her to rebuild from the ground up. Her physical recovery was slow but steady. The years of drugging and abuse had taken a toll on her body, leaving her with lingering health problems. She sought medical treatment and therapy, determined to restore not only her physical strength but also her sense of control over her own life. Psychologists and counselors became a crucial part of her support network, helping her navigate the deep psychological wounds left by Dominique's actions. Emotionally, Gisèle faced the challenge of trusting others again. The betrayal had not only robbed her of her agency but also cast a shadow over her relationships with family, friends, and even herself. Yet, through therapy and self-reflection, she began to reclaim her sense of identity, reminding herself that she was more than a victim, she was a survivor. As the months passed, Gisèle's focus shifted from her personal healing to advocacy. The publicity surrounding the trial had thrust her into the spotlight, making her a symbol of resilience for countless survivors of similar crimes. Although the attention was overwhelming at first, Gisèle recognized the power of her voice and began using it to advocate for change. She spoke at conferences and participated in panels addressing issues of consent, spousal abuse, and the role of technology in modern crimes. Her insights, grounded in her personal experience, resonated with audiences across France and beyond. Survivors reached out to her, sharing their own stories of betrayal and seeking guidance. Gisèle became a beacon of hope, offering support and encouragement to those who felt isolated and unheard. One of Gisèle's most significant contributions was her involvement in legislative efforts to reform French consent laws. She worked closely with victim advocacy groups and lawmakers, pushing for clearer definitions of consent, stricter penalties for crimes involving incapacitation, and stronger protections against digital exploitation. Her testimony before parliamentary committees was both moving and impactful, helping to bring about meaningful legal changes that would protect future victims. Despite the progress she made as an advocate, Gisèle remained a private person at heart. She valued her time with her children and grandchildren, finding solace in their laughter and love. Her family became a source of strength, a reminder that life could continue, even after such profound betrayal. Gisèle also returned to her hobbies, singing in her choir and tending to her garden, small but vital acts of reclaiming her peace. For Gisèle, the process of healing was not linear. There were moments of progress and moments of pain, times when the weight of what she had endured threatened to overwhelm her. But through it all, she remained steadfast in her determination to rebuild her life and help others in the process. By turning her trauma into action, Gisèle redefined what it meant to be a survivor. She refused to let Dominique's actions define her, instead choosing to rise above them and make a difference in the lives of others. Her journey became a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the possibility of finding light, even in the darkest of circumstances. Her legacy is not only the justice she achieved for herself, but the hope and change she inspired in others. Through her courage, she transformed her darkest moments into a light that guides others toward justice, healing, and the strength to reclaim their lives. Subscribe now for more powerful true crime stories that reveal the darkness and the strength within us all.